We hope you enjoy today's story. I think my biggest problem has always been my appearance. I'm not the kind of man women picture when they dream of their knight in shining armor. I'm a big, burly guy, standing at 190 centimeters tall and weighing nearly 140 kilograms. Fortunately, there's hardly any fat on me. I've got a thick, prominent nose that draws attention to my deep-set, slightly slanted eyes. I have all my teeth and a full head of reddish hair, though none of it does much to improve the overall picture. I work long hours as a heavy equipment operator, which means I keep my hair cut short. It's just easier that way. Despite all my flaws, I was lucky enough to find a woman who chose to spend her life with me. Loretta wasn't a stunner by any means, but she had a charm about her that I always found appealing. To me, she was just right. Standing at 160 centimeters, Loretta was petite compared to me. She endured my rough edges and often teased me about it, but always in a light-hearted, loving way. When she joked with me, I never felt insulted or small. It was comforting to be with someone who made me feel so at ease. We got married young, and soon after we had 2 kids. Brian, who's now 16, and Monica, who's a year younger. Luckily, the kids took after their mother more than me. They're smart and well-mannered, and I couldn't be prouder as a father. Life as a husband and dad was good, and I was content with how things were. I worked for my Uncle Sal, operating heavy machinery as part of what was more or less a family business. Uncle Sal ran the show, and we all got paid based on how many hours we could work. Any profit left at the end of the year, after covering new equipment, was divided among the family. It was a pretty sweet deal. Loretta had a job at a small company that did property evaluations for banks and investment firms. She wasn't the one doing the evaluations, but handled typing, formatting documents, and data entry. Our life together was good, so good that I felt like I should just leave everything as it was. But then something small made me pause. One day, I noticed a mark on Loretta's neck that looked suspiciously like a Hickey. Normally, I would have teased her about it, but this time, I kept quiet. If it was a Hickey, I knew I hadn't put it there. It could have been a bug bite, maybe an ingrown hair. But what made my suspicion worse was that she tried to cover it up with makeup, even when we were just at home. I could understand hiding it if we were going out, but why bother at home? If Loretta was seeing someone else, it had to be during the day. She never went out in the evenings when I was around. It tormented me for a whole week. By then, the mark had faded, but the memory of it stuck with me. Our sex life was still great. I might not have been as romantic as I should have been, but I always bought her flowers for no reason, never forgot her birthday or our anniversary. We went out regularly, and every year we took the whole family on vacation. I valued her not just as my wife, but as my companion. But now, this little red mark on her neck was driving me crazy with doubt. Work was slow, so Uncle Sal didn't mind giving me a few days off. I had no idea what I was looking for or what I was going to do. I just decided to follow her around to see if anything happened. I borrowed a car from one of the guys at work and armed myself with a crossword puzzle book to pass the time. For 2 days, nothing happened. I followed her to work, to lunch, and back home. On the 3rd day, just as I was starting to feel like a complete fool, Loretta left the office for lunch a bit earlier than usual. Instead of heading to her car, she walked around the building. A white company car pulled up, and Loretta got into the passenger seat. Probably just lunch with a colleague, I thought. But I followed them, and my worst fears were confirmed. The car pulled into the parking lot of a small, rundown motel near the state line. I recognized the guy as one of the appraisers Loretta worked with, Tom, whatever his last name was. He already had a key. They entered the room as if they had done it 100 times before. He was a good-looking guy, about 10 years younger than Loretta. They closed the curtains and blinds. I hadn't thought this far ahead. I didn't know what to do. The sensible thing would have been to wait for Loretta to come home that evening and talk to her face to face. But my emotions got the better of me. I got out of the car and headed towards the motel door. It was an old building, and the door frame was wooden. A strong enough push could break the door right off its hinges. I stopped one of the motel staff and told her to call 911. She gave me a strange look but grabbed her phone immediately. I decided to wait 5 more minutes before kicking down the door. My patience only lasted 2. I slammed my right shoulder into the door with all my strength. The lock and the hinges gave way, and the door crashed to the floor with a deafening noise, startling Loretta and her lover. They were lying naked in bed, and before the guy could even get off her, I grabbed him by the neck. Seeing my wife with another man was more than I could bear. He knew she was married, and she knew too. My rage exploded. Loretta had never seen this side of me. Tom, whatever his name was, didn't recover from the first 2 blows, which broke several of his ribs. After that, he couldn't move or catch his breath. I took my time, systematically hitting him in the face and body until he was covered in blood, bruises, and fractures. Loretta screamed for me to stop and even tried to grab me. During her lunge, I accidentally elbowed her in the mouth. She flew across the room, blood gushing from her split lip. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was handcuffed in the back seat of a police car. Paramedics were wheeling Tom away on a stretcher, and Loretta stood by the ambulance, holding a motel sheet to her lips. She looked over at the patrol car and saw me inside. Her face crumpled, and she burst into tears. A female police officer led her back to the room as the car pulled out of the motel parking lot. I didn't contest the charges, didn't request a lawyer or a trial. Justice was swift. Since I'd asked the maid to call 911 before breaking down the door, they called it premeditated. I didn't care much. I got a 2-year prison sentence. My brother Louis was the only one who saw me before I was sent to state prison. He promised to visit once things settled down a bit. I had no trouble in my new home, especially after the rumors spread about why I was there. It took 10 days before Louis showed up. "John, I was going to bring you cigarettes, but then I remembered you don't smoke." He lightened the mood with his little joke. "Stop talking nonsense, Louis. What's going on at home? No one tells me anything, and all I hear in this place is rumors and nonsense. It's as bad as it can get. The kids and the family are in despair, and Loretta has been hiding in the house since it happened. Brian and Monica are staying with Mom and Dad, but they plan to come back home later this week. I don't know anything about Loretta because she's not talking to anyone. Her sister Joyce approached the house, but Loretta didn't let her in." "Has Loretta been talking to the kids?" "No, they've tried several times, but she outright refuses to talk to them. I don't think she'll ever discuss what really happened with anyone. I take it she's not planning to go to work. Damn it, she's not even planning to leave the house. She's running out of food soon. Who's paying the bills?" "I don't know. I'll ask Brian to see if he can figure something out later this week. Monica is determined to come back home one way or another." "What about the guy?" "His name is Tom Bostick. He's still in the hospital and will probably be there for another couple of weeks." "What the hell? I just roughed him up a bit. Why is he still in that damn hospital?" "You really beat him up, John. Besides broken ribs and a collarbone, he had a lot of internal injuries. I couldn't get all the details, but I think it's somehow related to his kidneys and spleen. His reproductive organs took a hit from you too. He has to eat through a straw, and there's something wrong with one of his eyes." "I must have lost my temper. Seems like it. I think I need to talk to the kids. Could you bring them next time you come over?" "I don't understand why not." After Louis left, I made a list of things that needed to be taken care of in the house, based on what Louis told me about Loretta's behavior. I felt obligated to make sure things were handled properly, at least until the kids finished school. Brian and Monica showed up 5 days later. Louis wasn't with them. "Where's your uncle?" I asked as soon as I saw them. "He had to go to work. I picked up Mom's car from her office, and we decided to come here on our own," Brian replied, sounding a bit proud of himself. "What was she doing at the office?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "She's been there since the day you were arrested," Brian said. "Mom never picked her up. She hasn't driven or even left the house since then." "Is she okay?" I asked, turning to Monica, hoping for a different answer. Monica shook her head, looking down for a moment before meeting my eyes. "No, she doesn't talk. She just floats around the house like a ghost. She doesn't answer any questions and refuses to answer phone calls. Her voicemail is full. I've been trying to answer as many calls as possible, but only from family. Even reporters have been calling." "Guys, will everything be okay with you there, or do you want to stay with Grandma and Grandpa?" I asked, genuinely concerned about their well-being. Brian looked confident as he replied, "I think we'll be fine, Dad. We just need to establish some sort of daily routine." I was relieved to see that my kids were taking control of things. We spent the next hour discussing what they could do and how I could help, even from a distance. I was still getting a salary, so I offered to set up automatic bill payments for the utilities. I asked Monica to take her mother's debit card so they could withdraw cash for other expenses. Brian took on the responsibility of yard work and car maintenance, while also helping Monica with household chores and cooking. Apparently, Loretta could still take care of herself, but she had lost all desire to communicate. Monica mentioned that her mother had developed a bit of an obsession with cleaning and organizing the house. She would constantly dust and rearrange things for no apparent reason. I couldn't tell if that was a good or bad sign, but it was something I made a mental note of. Before they left, I asked Monica to tell her mother that I wanted to talk to her about what happened. Monica didn't seem optimistic that Loretta would want to, but she promised to try. Days turned into weeks, and Loretta never came to the prison to see me. She didn't call or write either. Monica and Brian tried their best to convince her, even bringing in Joyce, Loretta's sister, but nothing worked. 6 months passed, and everything settled into a bleak routine. Brian and Monica visited me regularly, and a few guys from work stopped by when they could. Then, things took an unexpected turn. 2 weeks after Tom Bostic was injured, his wife filed for divorce. He was left with nothing to fall back on, having to support 2 children along with paying alimony and rent. When he was finally discharged from the hospital, he was transferred to a rehabilitation center, where his expenses quickly exceeded his insurance coverage. Desperate, he decided to sue me. It was a complex, baffling situation, and I didn't understand much of it. But Uncle Sal stepped in. Within a week, the company's lawyer filed counterclaims against Bostic for alienation of affection and against the company where Bostic and Loretta worked. The lawyer was cunning and persistent. Suddenly, all legal actions from both sides ceased. I didn't get anything, but I didn't have to pay anything either. 3 more months passed, and the situation at home remained unchanged. Brian graduated from high school and enlisted in the Air Force, set to leave in a month. Monica had just gotten her driver's license, so they didn't think his departure would create any issues. Loretta still didn't answer phone calls and refused to leave the house. She didn't cause any problems for Monica, but this couldn't continue indefinitely. Loretta started saying no to Monica every time she tried to talk to her or visit me. Monica began coming to see me alone after Brian left, sometimes accompanied by Louis. Joyce, Loretta's sister, visited me once, but I never quite understood why. Almost a year had passed since I started serving my sentence. My wife had become reclusive, refusing to see or talk to anyone, including me. I spent countless hours reflecting on the situation. Loretta never apologized, never asked for my forgiveness, never explained why she had an affair, and never offered any solutions to fix what had gone wrong. It was as if I didn't matter at all, as if I were an insignificant speck in her life. Her lack of response to my feelings and the situation showed me that in her eyes, I wasn't worth her time or attention. I felt like a bug on her windshield or a piece of dirt stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Once the issue with me was resolved, she'd never have to think about it again. The more I dwelled on these thoughts, the angrier I became. Meanwhile, Tom Bostic completed his rehabilitation and moved into a cheap apartment near his work. Louis told me that Tom had developed a limp and seemed to have trouble with his right eye. At first, I felt a bit sorry for the guy, until Monica brought me some troubling news. One day, while Loretta was in the shower, Monica needed something from her mother's purse. She found a prepaid cell phone hidden at the bottom. The phone had only one programmed number. Monica wrote down both the phone number and the number from the directory. This discovery set off alarm bells in my head. Given how things were unfolding, I knew there was no chance of me going back to Loretta under any circumstances. But the thought that she might still be in contact with Bostic infuriated me. 2 weeks later, an announcement was made. 127 inmates, including me, would be released early. My name was on the list. I had behaved well in prison, had a job waiting for me on the outside, and was a first-time offender. How lucky could one person be? Louis and Monica came to pick me up. I decided to stay at my parents' house for a while until Loretta got used to my presence again. But it turned out to be an unnecessary precaution. Loretta had disappeared. For the first time in a year, she left the house. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, didn't leave a note. A quick check revealed she had taken most of her clothes and a few suitcases. It seemed that not only had I avoided confronting my wife about her affair, but she had also avoided me. I had eagerly awaited her explanation, but now it seemed I'd never get one. I also learned that Tom Bostic had quit his job last week. Interesting. Instead of staying with my parents, I returned home to Monica. She was happy to have me back, especially since she now had a steady boyfriend. Of course, that also meant I spent many nights at home alone. I never thought I'd miss my cellmates, but any company was better than none. A week later, I went back to work. It felt like I had never left. I felt indebted to Uncle Sal and his family, so I started working overtime, which no one denied me. Somehow, over the past year, I seem to have lost my taste for beer. It sounds strange, but it just didn't satisfy me like it used to. I never had a strong affinity for alcohol, so I started drinking a lot of soda and iced tea instead. I joked about it, but I was immune to peer pressure from friends. The most unsettling part started at night when I caught myself thinking about Loretta and Tom Bostic. They had made a fool of me. I didn't even know Bostic, but the way my wife treated me was undeserved. I had never treated her poorly, never insulted her physically or verbally. I always treated her with respect and love. I hadn't done anything to make her hate me, but I had the feeling that she didn't actually hate me. She just didn't feel anything for me at all. She had simply discarded me like an old shoe without a second thought. It was humiliating. Monica tried to help as much as she could, but there wasn't much she could do. I was glad she had found a boyfriend, especially after everything she had gone through with her mother last year. I wanted to give her all the time she needed to catch up on life. I also tried not to show my depression at home or at work. The more time I spent at work, the less I thought about Loretta. When I came home, I usually felt exhausted and slept well. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to visit Joyce, Loretta's younger sister. Joyce was divorced and had 2 children in elementary school. I had always appreciated her visits while I was in prison, even though I never really understood why she came. "John, it's good to see you. I heard you're back home. Come in. Would you like some coffee or a beer?" Joyce greeted me warmly as she led me into the kitchen. "Coffee would be great," I replied, following her inside. "I think I know why you're here," Joyce said as she set 2 cups of hot coffee on the table and sat across from me. "I may not know much, but I'll help if I can. The main question that you probably can't help me with is why," I said, taking a sip of the coffee. Joyce sighed lightly. "You're right, John. I can't help you with that. I've asked her several times in different ways, but she always either ignored me or changed the subject. Just last week, she refused to even meet with me. Suddenly, she wanted to talk. For a few moments, silence fell between us. Joyce seemed ready to answer my questions, but she was cautious about offering any information voluntarily. "Joyce, why did you come to see me in prison?" I asked directly. Joyce hesitated, then said, "I don't know. I felt like Loretta had somehow let you down, and I didn't think you deserved that. You didn't seem too happy to see me, so I didn't come back. I'm sorry." I was still hurting, I admitted. I didn't understand why you came, and I didn't know how to react. I guess I was too sensitive. Besides what I read in the newspapers, I still don't know what happened. "It's simple," I said with a bitter chuckle. "She cheated, I caught them, and I beat the guy up. End of story." "Except you spent a year in prison," Joyce reminded me. "I like to think of it as a vacation," I said, trying to find humor in the situation. It was better than one of those damn cruises. We both attempted to laugh, but it didn't work. The weight of the situation was too heavy. "Why are you really here, John?" Joyce finally asked. "Where is she?" I took a deep breath and decided to be straightforward. "She's in Reno." Joyce's eyes widened. "How do you know?" "I asked a question and got an answer," I said. "Loretta came to you about her divorce, didn't she?" Joyce nodded. "Yes, she did. She wanted advice on how to get a divorce without having to see or contact you. I told her she couldn't do that here. She seemed upset, but she didn't want to go to Nevada because of the residency requirements. Eventually, she decided it was her only option. The company she worked for had a branch in Reno, and that guy she was with, Tom, was able to get her transferred there. She plans to file for divorce as soon as she's been there long enough. All of this made sense. I didn't like it, but it made sense. I didn't understand why she hadn't done it while I was in prison. She could have sent me the papers, and I would have gladly signed them and sent them back. She waited too long and tangled herself up, I muttered. What the hell did I do wrong, Joyce? Joyce looked at me with a mix of sympathy and frustration. John, my husband was handsome, but he was an asshole. That's a bad reason to marry a man. Maybe Loretta just decided she wanted something different. It's a shame she didn't tell me that before we got married, I said, trying to force a smile. Then you wouldn't have Brian and Monica, Joyce pointed out gently. I nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. You're right about that. Joyce and I talked for a while longer before I got up to leave. As I thanked her for the coffee and conversation, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still missing something, some piece of the puzzle that would make everything clear. On the way out, I felt an uneasy sense of closure. I had more answers than I had before, but they didn't bring me any peace. As I drove away, I realized that I still had a lot to figure out. That night, I booked a week-long cruise in the Caribbean and gave the ticket to Louis. He wasn't married, and I knew he would appreciate the trip, especially since it was on my dime. In return, I borrowed his car without telling him why. The road to Reno took me 3 days. I found an empty building east of Sparks and had no trouble getting Tom Bostic to come out and assess its condition. He showed up with his trusty notepad and tape measure, just as I expected. Within 30 minutes, he was sitting in the trunk of Louis's car, heading east. I drove about 50 kilometers from Winnemucca before finding a convenient turnoff. I didn't know where the dirt road led, but I only needed the first mile. Tom was still breathing when I put him in the trunk, but at some point during the drive, he stopped. It was a bit annoying because I had wanted to talk to him a bit more. I found a small, desolate ravine with plenty of rocks and scrubby vegetation. I took his watch, wallet, and cell phone before rolling his body into the ravine. Eventually, someone might find him, but not before the coyotes and other scavengers had their way with him. I continued my journey eastward, feeling somewhat less humiliated. I never considered myself a vengeful person, but it seemed I was. In Elko, I stopped at a casino and left Tom's wallet in the men's restroom. I was confident someone would pick it up and use the credit cards. No one would report the wallet missing, so no one would report the unauthorized charges. His watch was nothing special, so I tossed it in a trash bin. By the time I crossed into Utah, I decided I would call Joyce when I got back home. Maybe nothing would come of it, but at least I could enjoy a nice dinner at a restaurant with her. Just as I was starting to recover from the ordeal, my cell phone rang. The display showed the same number Monica had written down. It seemed I was finally going to talk to my wife. Tom, where the hell are you? Tom, are you there? Answer me. Her voice was panicked, and I could hear the fear in her tone. My voice, hoarse and gruff, was unmistakable. Sorry, you've got the wrong number, I said calmly. There was a moment of silence, and then I heard her whisper, Oh God, no. I tossed my cell phone out of the car window and kept driving. In a few days, I'd be home, and I really hoped Louis was enjoying his vacation. Thank you for staying with us until the end. If you found the story interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. We'll see you next time.